Hi, I'm Madison Paige. I'm the founder and CEO of Bold Blue Campaigns, and you're watching Mr. Media.
Elections in Florida are screwed up, especially for Democrats and Democratic candidates. The same is true in places such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Georgia, to name just a few states of electoral disrepair. But today I want to focus on Florida because that's where the nation's eyes turn every 4 years and because, well, that's where I live. As the 2018 midterms wound down, I came upon a very personal Facebook Live video by a frustrated, angry Democratic political consultant and activist who had a message for the Florida Democratic Party. I told you so. Madison Paige, founder of Bold Blue Campaigns, apparently had presented a roadmap to the state's Democratic Party for overcoming obstacles and winning more elections up and down the November ballot. Was she right? Was she wrong? I don't know. But today, in my small way, I want to give her a direct forum for sharing her ideas moving forward. Madison Paige, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I actually went back this evening before we spoke and rewatched, and I had forgotten. But I mean, you actually you at the beginning you said you just wanted to spend a minute, and I think it actually went on for an hour and 20 minutes. You were an angry Democrat that night, and I want to talk to you in a few minutes about what Bold Blue does and its services. But first, I really want to talk to you about what drew me to you in the first place. It had been a long election night, 2018, and this video, you took aim at Florida's Democratic Party for not heeding your warnings about the 2018 midterms and taking your advice. And you were extremely fired up that night, and I'm guessing very frustrated.
Very, very, very much so. Florida is never going to, it's always been a state that has been won or lost in the margins. Always. There's never going to come a time in the state of Florida where there's wide margins for statewide races. It's always a matter of a handful of votes here and a handful of votes there. And I think that the state party has a responsibility to understand that and to do what it needs to do to mitigate that situation, to make sure that we are gathering every vote possible, that we are maximizing our opportunities, particularly in statewide races like gubernatorial races, senatorial races, AG races. Those types of statewide races are really going to be won and lost at the margins. When we think about what happened even in 2008, when Obama ran for president the first time, he only won by about, I think it was 120, 130,000 votes. And he had a full, huge operation going in that state, and it was one of the largest turnouts electorally in the country in decades, right? And even then, it was just a handful of votes. This should tell the people who are in charge that whatever you do, whoever is going to be on the Democratic ticket, whatever the situation, no matter how dynamic they may be, no matter how favorable the environment may be for Democrats, what we have to realize is that there will be the wins and losses are going to happen at the margin. And indeed, that's exactly what happened in 2018.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Obama right at the top. One of the criticisms of of Obama and the folks around him over the years has been, in retrospect, that they never concentrated on the down ballot races, and they lost governorships, they lost state houses, and they didn't seem to fully appreciate how much that would hurt not just Obama but the Democratic Party in the long run. And so I thought it was really interesting in 2018 that there was so much talk about, oh, we have to focus on all races and all states, and we have to have candidates in every race. We can't just take for granted that we're going to lose all these places. And I thought it's amazing to me that actually has to be said out loud, that hadn't been obvious for a decade, but it wasn't.
Right. It's funny. I have said multiple times that trickle down doesn't work in economics, and it also does not work in politics. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes in politics, we come to people and we 3 months before the election and we go, "Hey, would you vote for us? We need your vote. We need your vote. Vote for the president, vote for the senator, and vote for the governor." And there are people who are not engaged in the process. For those of us who are active and politically savvy and politically engaged, it seems so obvious. But for that working mother who has three kids and two jobs, she's not engaged. And to her, it doesn't make as much. She may not see the connection between her involvement and her life and what happens in her life. And yet here we come 3 months before the election, sending her text messages and phone calls and begging her to vote. And she looks at us like the way we look at people who only call us when they want something and we don't like them. What we like to say is that person, that woman with, three kids and two jobs, she probably cares about the bus schedules, or she may care about, regulations around daycare. Mm-hmm. And if there is a local candidate who's running and focusing on those issues that matter to her, it's an easier way to bring those people into the process. And once they're engaged in the process, and once they feel empowered, and once they've been listened to and taught that shown that they really can have a difference, make an impact on how their lives are, it's an easy sell to say, by the way, when you're voting for the city commission candidate, go ahead and vote for the governor because he's going to do this or she's going to do that. And by the way, the senator who we're going to send to Washington, he's got some things that we want you to, vote for too. So think about them too. Much easier to do that from the bottom up than it is from the top down. And this is something that, we believe very strongly at Bold Blue Campaigns, but we've been trying to sort of make sure that people understand that we can do this from the bottom up.
So you believe in defying gravity, basically. You believe trickle down doesn't work, but trickle up does.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. It does seem like it defies gravity, but really I like to think of it more like it's a foundation, right? So we're building a foundation for growth. Plants don't grow from the top down. They grow from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And the roots that take hold, the stronger they are, and the more supported they are, and the more fertile the soil that they're embedded in, the stronger the tree is. And so we believe in planting those roots, but we don't believe that it starts at the top. We believe it starts right at the bottom.
I know for recent years, as we've heard more and more about voter ID rules and the changing laws, and you never seem to hear about voter registration drives until the last possible minute. And every year I think the same thing. Why? And I particularly think about the Democrats. Why don't the Democrats have a year-round registration program, especially in these places where people need IDs that maybe they don't have? You can't get that done 2 weeks before election, right? I mean, it doesn't work. And as you say, people have other things that they're worried about. You need to capture them when they're at ease, when they're not stressed out. And I don't know. It's such a I felt your frustration so much in that video. And I don't know if that video is public or private on your account, but people should go and friend you on Facebook just so they can watch that video because it is incredibly heartfelt. One of the things you said is during that video, you said, "What we are doing is not magic; it's hard work." What did you mean by that?
Well, when we went into Florida, I'm a Florida resident, so I am used to the the frustrations that come with Florida politics. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to eliminate some of these problems. And we wanted to say, listen, let's begin building now. Let's begin working now. Let's begin doing some things and laying some foundational things now. I approached the Democratic Party, the Florida Democratic Party, in March of 2017 and said to them, hey, listen, there are going to be races that there are going to be counties that you can't be bothered with. You're not going to have the resources for it. You're not going to have the human resources or the financial resources to focus on them, but there are going to be margins. We've analyzed these margins. We've taken a look in detail at these various jurisdictions and counties, and we think that there's room for us to increase margins in those counties. Let us handle that, and you guys can focus on what you're focusing on, and together we can increase our odds of victory. This was in March of 2017. We didn't even have a candidate then, did we? But we understood strategically that we were going to need margins. We understood that. Again, this is not magic. Anybody who's familiar with the state of Florida and politics knows that this is how it's going to be, no matter who the nominee is. And we had some conversations with the Democratic Party of Florida at the time, and then they went dark. And so what we just did was we just decided to focus on a couple of the counties that we could. And sure enough, we went in and we actually implemented strategy in cooperation with candidates and campaigns and county parties, based upon data that we were collecting, information that we had, not anything magical, just hard work. You have to spend the time listening to people. You have to spend time understanding what they care about. You don't get to go in and tell voters what they care about. You have to listen to what they say they care about. We worked with one campaign in Hillsborough County where the voters cared about transportation. Now, they were very specific about what they liked and what they didn't like, and this particular candidate ran on that issue, and she won. And so, again, it's not magic what we're doing. It is really just hard work. And I think the other issue a lot of times, and I'll just put this out there, for the most part, a lot of the problem that we see is that there's no money in working around the clock, right? It costs money to do these things, and it also there's no money to be made if in an off season. So a lot of the people who are vendor types don't want to. There's no money to be made. There's no one to hire them, right? And then the nonprofit organizations are already stretched. And it requires a great deal of money and a great deal of resources. And frankly, people don't tend to think outside the box. They're saying, well, we'll just wait until June or July of the election year. That's when everything starts. And it's like, yeah, but when you do that, you become that guy who calls only when he wants to borrow $20 for gas, right? And nobody likes that guy.
So you need to fill in a gap for me, and hopefully for viewers as well. When you talked about meeting with the Florida Democratic Party in March of 2017, what did they know of you? Did they already have a relationship with you and your company? Were you working together? Fill us in a little back on the background.
So no, we did not have a working relationship with the Florida Democratic Party at the time. What we did was we basically called them. My team did some analysis, and we said, there's 32 counties in this state that really we could probably increase some margins. Doesn't mean that we would win, that every candidate in every one of those counties would win, but we identified 32 counties that we felt that if there were some resources and effort devoted there, we could increase margins. And in some cases, have candidates there who would prevail and win, and certainly do some party building at the local level. Anybody who's familiar with Florida politics knows that a lot of the second tier and third tier counties sort of feel that the party has abandoned them. right? They don't feel the candidates who run in those counties feel that they're not supported by the party. And we approached them and said, hey, listen, we've got a great solution. We've identified these 32 counties. We think that if we could go in and work with people on the ground there, we had a complete media and communications training and candidate support package. And we said, let us go in and take care of some of these things in cooperation with you, so that way they believe that they understand that you're supporting them, even though you're going to have to be paying attention to gubernatorial races and AG races and the big major races in the state. We'll take care of some of these, and what we're hoping to do as a result of this is to increase margins, build foundation, repair relationships between these usually neglected counties and the Florida party, and the state party, and begin to uh, build or rebuild in some of these counties. And we might be able to actually find some candidates who would actually prevail in their races because they have support that they don't normally get. So no, we did not have a relationship with the party, but we did approach them about it. And they said, sounds good, send us a proposal. So we did. And it was a detailed proposal. And we sent them a proposal, and we had a couple of conversations after that. They seemed to like it, and then, there was a lot of discord happening in the state party at the time, and I don't know if we got lost in the shuffle, but unfortunately, it was never picked back up. And here we are with DeSantis as governor.
Yeah. Now, Florida, as I recall, has 67 counties. So you were
Yes.
talking about 32, so almost half. Were these rural counties? Were these urban counties? I'm guessing rural.
Yeah, it was a combination of them, from the Panhandle all the way down through the central part of the state, the western part of the state. We had separated them into various tiers. So there were, I think there were 17 core counties, and then we had other counties that we considered tier 2 and tier 3 counties. They were smaller counties, but we looked at them and we looked at the numbers there, and we looked at a lot of the factors that made up those counties, and we felt that with proper support, there could be some margins. We could increase registrations there. We could find good candidates there. We could increase margins and turnout, in some of those counties. And again, party build. We wanted to also create an environment where people who were running in those counties felt supported by the state party, and also felt supported in their campaigns, that they were running strong campaigns, that we could support whoever their staff were, who may have been more or less experienced, right? To support them, to train them, to get them up to speed on best practices in campaign management. I mean, all of those things were what we were talking about doing. And we felt that it would return not just benefits in the 2018 cycle, but in the future, in future cycles in those counties. Because at the end of the day, you have to play everywhere. If you're going to, the name of the game in politics is the acquisition of power. People who are sitting in power get to make the rules. And if we don't play, we don't win. And in some counties, we haven't had a Democrat on the ticket in decades. And so you have people in these counties who have never even heard the liberal argument. They've never even, the Republicans have never even been challenged to defend their positions on giving, for example, tax breaks to businesses who come into the region. They've never had to defend their positions on these policies because we have not even been there to challenge them in the public square. We believe that if there's a Republican on the ticket, there needs to be a Democrat on the ticket, and we need to force them to spend money and defend their positions in every district in America. That's what we think.
I read a story just today in, of all places, The Hollywood Reporter. It was they were talking about Eric Garcetti, who just won as governor in California, and how he could have spent the whole time of his campaign just focusing on his campaign, but instead what he did was he operated kind of an outreach to they selected a number of candidates around the country where they thought that they could be successful. And what he learned in the process, well, a couple things. I think this applies to what you're talking about. If not, I'll apologize later. But he was talking about that it cost a minimum of about $1 million to win a congressional race in California. But he found that in Oklahoma, $10,000 could be the difference between influencing a race there or not. And then he probably has some presidential interest, and so he was feathering his own bed to a degree. But at the same time, I think he learned something that maybe the Florida Democratic Party did not understand, is that in these counties that you're talking about, where the Democrats haven't even run someone, there are still Democrats in these places, and you can get them out to vote. And if you increase, and I think this is where you're coming from, if you get the Democrats to turn out and vote for Democrats, even if you get 15 to 20% more people in those places, well, you take 30 counties and you do that. Suddenly, a race that Andrew Gillum lost by 15,000 votes, or Bill Nelson lost by less than 10,000 votes, is a whole lot closer and maybe makes the difference. But if you just give up, you got nothing.
That's it. It's absolutely, absolutely correct. And in Florida, it's always going to be a margins race. In 2020, I can tell you right now, without knowing anything about who's going to run and who's going to be on the ticket, I can tell you right now, in 2020, the statewide races, any statewide race, the presidential race is going to come down to a handful of votes, period. I already know that. I already know that. And I can tell you the next time there's a senatorial race in Florida, it will come down to a handful of votes. This is the way it is in our state. And there are ways to mitigate that without relying on, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County? Oh my God, Tampa and St. Pete and Hillsborough County and Pinellas, and oh my God, Orange County, and the same thing. I mean, those counties are always going to be important. But there are like you said, there's 67 counties in the state of Florida, and there are Democrats in every one of them, and there are unaffiliated voters in every one of them. And more importantly, there are eligible voters who have not bothered to engage and vote, or who may not even be registered to vote and are not engaged, who are absolutely gettable. Because we know that there are positions as liberals on issues are common issues. I think Pew Institute did a study a few years ago that showed if you take the labels away from the issues, if you don't use universal health care or Obamacare or retirement pensions, if you take those buzzwords away, what you discover is that everybody sort of pretty much believes that you should be able to see a doctor without going broke. And people don't seem to have a problem with the idea that if everybody pitches in a little bit, everybody gets access to health care. Mm-hmm. It's only when you begin to use these labels that have become very politicized that you start to see a drop-off and you start to see issues. So what we believe is, listen, let's just talk about it in regular everyday language that regular everyday people care about. And let's talk about these things at the local level first. And then what we'll discover is that people will embrace liberal values. They already are liberal. A lot of people are liberals and don't realize it. Yeah. And we just want to bring them into the process. And there are hundreds of thousands of people like that across the state of Florida and in every state in the country. And if we would implement a strategy to begin to engage them, to begin to bring them into the process and to help them understand that they do have the power to make a difference in the way their lives are. Not, the Senate and the presidency, I can understand how people in certain circumstances don't really believe that it makes much difference to them. But certainly what happens in your city commission and your county commission make a big difference. What happens in your state house makes a really big difference. It's not hard to draw direct lines for people and to bring people into that process. And if we can do that, I believe that as Democrats, as liberals, as progressives, we can really begin to change the country. I believe.
I remember a year or two ago, maybe it was longer, someone started pointing out that in Kentucky, uh, bright red Kentucky, Mitch McConnell state, uh, people were so anti-Obamacare, not realizing that the Affordable Care Act, ACA, Obamacare, had just been rebranded in Kentucky, and they called it Connect,
Right,
KY Connect,
right,
and you know, they just didn't know. And then when they started losing it,
right,
oh, I didn't know that was Obamacare. Yeah, well, okay,
right,
you're
right.
you know. So since that video, and since you were so outspoken about it and passionate, which is what I really liked, have you heard from anybody in Florida? Have any of them come around and go, we need to talk to you some more. Let's reopen the conversation, or have you know?
I will say that I am very okay. The state party officially no.
Okay.
But I am very happy to say that we are talking to people in the state who do get it and who do seem to have as much frustration about this as we do and understand exactly what our philosophy is and what we're trying to do. We're very excited about that. But more importantly, because for us, what we do is really all about grassroots. Um, People are starting to understand because we didn't just operate in Florida. We've been around since 2013 and we've operated in 17 states nationwide since
Hmm.
our founding. So what people are starting to understand is that supporting these local candidates and these state level candidates who, like you said, $10,000 is probably all they're going to have. They're not going to raise much more than that, maybe 10, 30, 20, $30,000 during the entire life of their campaign. They're going to need help. And if we can support them, if we can help them to run strong campaigns, that we can begin to build strength right in our local communities and to begin helping people improve their lives. And so what we're noticing is that we're getting a lot of inquiries from individual people, just regular everyday people going, how can I support you? How can I do, what can I do? What can I do?
Hmm.
And that's encouraging because that's really what we're all about. That's really what we're all about.
I have to ask you about Andrew Gillum for a minute because I'm thinking about this, and I'll be honest. I supported Gwen Graham uh, during the primaries for a very simple reason. Uh, I liked I liked Gillum, but I didn't think he had a chance to win.
Yeah.
I was always very fond of Bob Graham, Gwen's father. She was no Bob Graham, but I thought she had her moments.
Right.
Do you think that if Andrew Gillum had been leading, if he had been more well known, if people believed that he could actually win, he would have had a different approach? And I mean, in the final months of the campaign, he was all in. I mean, he was. I'm using Obama term. He was fired up. He was and his commercials all along were very good, I thought. But because he came into it so late, he only had so much time to turn heads.
Mhm.
Did he do? Did his campaign do smart things? Did they do any stupid things? And
I think they did a lot of very smart things. And I don't know everything about the strategy that they employed, but one of the things that I do remember that I do know about, for example, is one of his digital out. One of the things that they did digitally was to advertise in video games, which I thought was brilliant.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant, and I think that's very smart. It's about me, and interestingly, I mean, if you know anything about the demographics of video games, a lot of video game players, particularly the ones that he was advertising, are women, between the ages of 30 and 55.
Hmm.
Very smart strategy that they employed. That they chose, they obviously chose certain games, but I mean, I think that was a very smart strategy. I also recognized that when I was in Hillsborough, I came into the state. I'm here in Washington D.C. most of the time, but I came down to Florida for the last for a period of time during the last couple of months, and one of the things that I did notice that Gillum did that I thought was smart was he did cut ads for local candidates. He was cutting ads saying down ballot, down ballot. Down. There was a very strong push for down ballot. And I appreciated that because when I was working for the Obama campaign in '08, there was no such push. And I remember directing, even though I wasn't necessarily told to do this, but I remember directing my volunteers, and all the people in my that I was in charge of. As far as stupid things, I don't know. I would just say I don't know enough about the inner workings of his campaign to say what he did that was stupid. I would just say that it was stupid that the Florida party didn't understand that this was a margins game and that they did not understand that we would need, to find votes in places that we might not otherwise find them. I do think, I mean, he went to the Panhandle, he did some things there, and I thought that was good. I mean, and everything, but at the end of the day, like I said, I'm making a prediction right now for 2020. It's going to be a margins game. It's going to be down to a handful of votes. It's always been that way here, always. And it's not going to change between now and 2020, and it certainly was the case in 2018. And the question is, for the decision makers, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?
Well, let's talk a little about 2020 for a minute. Before we start wrapping up. In 2018, I think the Democrats had to defend 25 senatorial seats, I think was the number. They lost 4, but they surprised and won 3 Republican seats that were being defended. So they still came out down. But what in 2020, I think it's 23 Republicans who have Senate seats up. Any predictions for how that might go and how the Democrats might be able to do to the Republicans what the Republicans did to them this year?
Well, I think the first thing that Democrats have got to recognize for 2020 is that we cannot take 2018 as 2018 is an outlier. That's probably not going to be a popular thing to say because people want to believe that this is, the wave is going to keep going.
Right.
And it may, but I am more comfortable saying that this was an outlier. It was a good outlier, but it was an outlier. We absolutely must continue being strategic and smart and bold about what we're doing. Because not only is 2020 going to be pivotal, we're going to have a huge turnout because it's a presidential election, but also redistricting will be happening after 2020. So we've got to be concerned about what's happening in these state houses. I know my company personally is laser focusing on states. We've done some analysis, and we're going to be focusing on even though we provide services in all 50 states, we're going to be really focusing on certain state legislatures because we recognize the implications of redistricting. And I know right now Democrats are, having a halcyon moment because we've got the House back and nobody thought that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is we probably can't take that for granted in the next cycle. And we really are going to have to make sure that we are focusing on state legislatures so that when redistricting happens, we don't have to be hoping and praying for a miracle in the electoral output like we did this year. We can make sure that redistricting is fair and doesn't unfairly disadvantage us, as it has for the last 10 years. So I think my recommendation for Democrats is, as always, focus on local, That's going to bring you margins. That's going to make sure that you're engaging people. Listen to voters. Don't tell them, do you care about healthcare, the economy, or, you listen to them and let them tell you in their own words what they care about, and then you build your campaign around that. You don't get to tell them what they care about. You have to listen to them, and you listen to them at the local level, and you don't wait until 3 weeks before, 3 or 4 months before the campaign. You begin talking to them now. You begin finding ways to engage them now. You begin bringing them into that process now. And in fact, that's one thing that we actually set up. We're setting up we've set up Go Left. We have set up uh, Gloves Off America for exactly that reason, to bring people into the process in the off times, doing fun things to really kind of like um, what do they call them? Block parties. Did they have block parties when you were young?
Probably. I don't recall being invited, but yeah, I'm sure they did.
Block parties. One of the things that we found out, for example, I'll give you an example. One of the things we found out, we did some polling in Duval County. We found out that almost 50% of people didn't even know where their voting precinct was.
Mm.
So these types of things can be dealt with in between cycles. I think that's really important. I think we need to focus on engaging people, beginning at the local municipal level, working up to the state level, and then working up to our federal level. And I think we need to be actively involved with people in people's communities between cycles in ways that are not necessarily overtly political. I think that's important.
I'll add something to that. You were talking about a lot of people don't even know where their polling place is. I like to think of myself as fairly involved and interested in politics, and I actually didn't know until this past year how you would go about getting a yard sign for a candidate. I'm admitting that for a reason, because I mean it never. My wife had worked at a newspaper for years and then suddenly didn't work there, and when she worked there, we couldn't have yard signs.
Oh,
And so it was a big deal to us that we could finally have a yard sign for candidates. And so, and then I suddenly realized I don't know where to do that. And so I thought maybe the county Democratic headquarters.
mm-hmm.
And then they actually didn't have. I voted for Gillum. Okay, I'll be up front, folks. But they didn't have any signs. And I thought, how could you not have signs? The election is like 2 months away. And then I kept going back. And then at some point I reached out to my neighbors. I said, I'm going down to the Pinellas County Democratic headquarters, and I'm going to get a Gillum sign and maybe a Nelson sign for the yard. Does anyone else want one? And I actually did not know what side of the fence any of these neighbors were on. But we had a group text, and we're very friendly with each other. And I had 3 neighbors get back to me immediately, say, yes, I'll take a sign. And I had one that got back and said, oh, no, we're voting for the other people. And I was like, fine, okay, great. And then, so I think I wound up with 4 or 5 signs. And that evening I went through and gave them to my neighbors, and then everybody put them in their yard. It was cool. And then the next day I'm walking my dog, and some neighbors saw me and said, did you have anything to do with that? And I thought, yeah. Well, why didn't you ask me? Oh, did you want to sign? Yes. So I had to go back the next day and get like 3 or 4 more yard signs. So within 2 days, suddenly we had like 8 houses that had Democratic signs. And I've lived in the same house for 30 years in St. Petersburg. I have never seen anything like that in the neighborhood. And I think it has a lot to do with, judging from talking to my own neighbors and my own experience, nobody knew where to get the damn signs. It was that simple. I mean, I thought, man, if it comes down to something that simple, right. And we're that uninformed, so right. I just wanted to throw that out there, because,
Yeah. I mean, it's not uncommon. I mean, and that's just yard signs, right? I mean, if you're a person, how do you find out who to vote for?
Right.
I mean, if you're a part of the Democratic Party, you can call, and there's a slate, or they may have a card with recommendations. But if you're just a regular person, how would you even know, right? These are things that we really believe lower the engagement and make it harder for people. We just want to make it easier for people. We want people to be engaged. We want to help candidates get into the race. We want to make sure that they're running strong, but also at the same time, we want to make sure that citizens have an easier time having their voice heard, having access to the things that they need in order to vote and to be engaged in this process. We are the result. The government that we have is a result of what we do. And so we are trying to facilitate that on a couple of different fronts, the candidate front and the citizen front. And I couldn't be more proud of what we're doing. And I hope that, Democrats across the country will sort of do the same thing.
All right, two more things for you. One, in line with what you were just saying, I want to give you a minute here to just tell people what you do and what services Bold Blue Campaigns has. So if they're wondering after all this conversation what you do, or if they're thinking about running for office, here's your commercial. Go ahead and tell people what you do and how you can help out candidates or parties.
So the biggest problem that we identified, we're a group of progressive Democrats who said, we're just tired of losing. And we identified some problems. The smaller campaigns, the municipal campaigns, city commission, county commission, school board, judge, state house, and state senate campaigns, they're campaigns that are never going to be, a lot of them don't raise millions of dollars. And you know what that means in politics, right? That means that you're not going to be able to afford to hire the big fancy consultants and the big fancy folks that come by and manage your campaign and all of the things that you need to run a campaign that cost a lot of money. Probably you're not going to be able to afford. Most of these small campaigns earn less than $50,000 in the entire life of their campaign. So how are you able to run competently if you're not going to have a lot of money? Most of them will hire people as volunteers to run their campaign, and these people really believe in the candidate, but they're not experts. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're just not experts. What we do as Bold Blue Campaigns is we support their staff. We support county parties. We support individual candidates, staff persons who may not be that experienced. We are grassroots supported, and people contribute to what we do. And then we hire people who have decades of experience in field operations, in campaign strategy, in data, in communications, in media. We have all those people on our staff, and we provide direct support to these small campaigns that otherwise would never be able to access the types of people that we have in our employ. So that makes them competitive. It makes them, puts them in a position to be able to run strong competitive campaigns. And we don't care if you're running in a hard red district where it's 75% Republican, or if you're running in a blue district. We don't care. We're going to support you. If you're on the ticket and you need help, we're going to support you. So that's what we do. And we work cooperatively with state parties, county parties, and individual campaigns. And we do this affordably because we're grassroots supported. So we're not, we're in a position where we don't have to charge candidates fees that are just not sensible for the type of race that they're running. And then on the other side, we have Gloves Off America, which is our citizen engagement division. We say you can have the best campaigns and the best candidates in the world, but if people are not engaged, it doesn't matter. If you can't get the vote, then it doesn't matter. So we have Gloves Off America, which is our citizen engagement. And through our citizen engagement, we do exactly what we've been talking about all along, is bringing people into the process, engaging people, keeping them informed about what's happening in their state and in their communities, so that they can make sure that they're exercising their power and really shaping their own destiny and the destiny of themselves and their families and their communities. So we have all of the people that just regular everyday people sign up at Gloves Off America, and we organize to get things done. We are just a company that just got tired. We do things very differently, and we just got tired of the same conventional sort of. We keep doing, it seems like Democrats, we keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, and it's not happening, right? And so we're frustrated. We are the majority in this country. There's like 67% of us are liberal, but we're not in power. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so we said, let's just throw out everything that we think we know and build something from the ground up and figure out how we fix this. And that's what we're about, fixing it. And we've been doing a good job of it ever since 2013.
You said during that original video that I saw, we outnumber the Nazis and the homophobes.
Yes,
We
we
should
do.
not be ruled by them.
Absolutely.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous. The acquisition of political power is the most important thing that we could be doing. And we have the numbers for it. We have the heart for it. And there's no reason why we can't do it. The only thing we're missing is the strategic framework for it. And that's what we're here for.
All right, I got one more thing to ask you about. Nice commercial, by the way.
Thank
There are perhaps 15, maybe even 20 men and women who are talking about or being talked about as Democratic presidential candidates in 2020. Politics is your business, so I feel I have no problem in putting you on the spot. I'm not going to ask you to pick one. I'll give you a little wiggle room and say, give me 3 people that you think will be in the run for it when summer 2020 comes along.
Summer of 2020.
You get 3.
I get 3.
I'll give you 3.
Wow, that is such a tough question. I think everybody just is in love with Beto, right? O'Rourke.
Yep.
I do think he's saying that he's not going to do it. I'm not 100% sure of that. There are other people who are looking at Kennedy. And I know that there's going to be people who have an issue with it because it sort of feels like, King.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, he's not a bad guy. I really, I was having a conversation with someone on my Facebook page today, and it was so funny because I know that we're going to have primary wars. The people are saying Bernie's going to run again, and that's a possibility. In fact, I would be surprised if he didn't. I think there's just so many up and coming. Here's what I love about what I'm seeing happen now. So many up and coming, younger, energetic, progressive people. One thing that always happens on the Democratic side is we always have a fantastic slate of people to choose from. Always. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the Republicans. I mean, on the Republican side, there's like 2 people who aren't completely crazy, and everybody else is like completely crazy, right? And they always end up with the completely crazy one.
Yeah.
Our side never looks like that. Mm-hmm. Every single person who's in a primary on our side is qualified and I would feel completely comfortable with as president. I have my favorites, and there are a couple of people who I would probably prefer, but I would say I am not sure that, or I think O'Rourke is just. I think we're going to see Cory Booker. I think we're going to see O'Rourke. I think we're going to see Kennedy. I think we'll see Sanders. I think we'll see a few of those folks. And what I said to a friend of mine on Facebook just today, as a matter of fact, was, I'm voting for our candidate. That's what I do know. I'm voting for the Democratic nominee. I don't care who it is. I already know that. So that's one thing. I guess I can sit back and sort of watch the shenanigans as they unfold, and hopefully they won't be too damaging to us as a party. But I think if we can get into a mindset where, say, I'm supporting whoever we decide on, I think that's the most instructive thing and the most productive thing that we can be, how we can frame our thinking, because we're going to fight, because that's what we do as Democrats.
Of course.
But I sort of like. Can I tell you? I sort of like O'Malley.
O'Malley, really?
No, it's crazy, right?
A little bit.
I grew up in Maryland, so that's maybe I'm a little prejudiced.
He had a few too many bad moments when he ran against Clinton. I'm afraid I don't. Sorry. Yep. I think he'd be fine as a cabinet post or an ambassador or something. But yeah. But I don't think he's. Sorry. Well, listen, folks. You can learn more about Democratic political consultant Madison Paige's company and Madison herself at Bold Blue Campaigns at the website, boldbluecampaigns.com. Twitter and Facebook, I assume, for the company and yourself?
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could go, Bold Blue Campaigns is on Twitter, Bold Blue Campaigns on Facebook, and I think I'm Madison Paige, the Madison Paige on Facebook.
Okay. The Madison Paige. Go and friend the Madison Paige and watch this incredible video of her meltdown, because it's I mean, and I say meltdown in a very affectionate way, because it really got to me. I've actually sat through it twice because I just it fascinated me. Well, the Madison Paige, thank you so much for joining us today on Mr. Media, and good luck to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure having a conversation with you. Thank you.
Turn your back on the deceiver. It's a bad idea to believe her. A bad idea to believe her.